My son thought my salary was his, but the bank revealed a transformative surprise that made him. Tom stared at the letter as if it were a snake about to strike. His fingers were trembling, and the words floated in front of him. Unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. It seemed ludicrous at first, especially given his relentless grind at the factory. At 45, he felt the weight of every paycheck hanging over his head like an anvil. He thought about Jake, his 16-year-old son, who had a way of treating money like confetti, believing his father's earnings meant a constant flow of gadgets and the latest sneakers. He needed to set things right, but didn't know how without shattering the fragile peace they shared. There was a moral dilemma clawing at him. Sell the land, pocket the cash to alleviate their current struggles and keep the roof over their heads, or keep it and risk leaving Jake anchored in complacency. Tom's heart sank into his gut. He had always tried to instill values of hard work and responsibility in his son, but how could he bridge that gap with a boy who only saw dollar signs? The factory was already under pressure for layoffs, and every day felt like a ticking time bomb. Would he still have a job to come to next week? The uncertainty crackled like static in his mind, tightening his chest. "Dad, can we get the new gaming console?" Jake's voice broke through his thoughts on one particularly exhausting evening. Tom braced himself, knowing the answer wouldn't be the one Jake wanted. The boy's eyes sparkled with excitement, but Tom felt his stomach nod. He wanted to say yes, to give him something bright and shiny that would momentarily distract from the bleakness of their lives. But could he? Would that be another step toward enabling Jake's entitlement? "Jake, we need to talk about money," he started, hesitating. But Jake's face clouded over. Was it disappointment, or worse, contempt? "What's there to discuss? Your salary's fine, Dad. Just buy it." Tom's pulse quickened. The rift between them felt like a chasm. "It's not that simple. I work long hours to just keep us afloat, and—" Jake's eyes turned fierce. "You always say that. Maybe if you actually let me have a bit of cash, I could earn my own money." The rebellion stung like ice water in Tom's veins. He wrestled with the urge to shout, to remind his son that life wasn't a fast-paced game where money grew on trees. Before they spiraled into another argument, Tom took a breath. "Please, just listen. Why? So you can control me? You're not the only one who has to live with these stupid decisions." Jake spat, unleashing a wave of frustration that echoed through their small kitchen. Tom felt a rush of anguish, his heart breaking at the thought of chasing his son further away while grappling with his own fears of losing everything he'd worked for. Instinct told him to pull Jake close, to teach him, but it was clear the son saw not a mentor, but a gatekeeper instead. Tom opened up about his fears and worries, the impending layoffs, the struggle to make ends meet. "Do you want to know what keeps me awake at night? It's not just your future, Jake. It's losing everything." Tom's voice cracked, turning raw as he revealed his vulnerability. But just as the tension peaked, the evening news buzzed in the background, and a report flashed across the screen. Layoffs coming to the factory. The hopeful bubble they lived in popped, and both father and son stared in disbelief. Realities crushed dreams in an instant. With the future now more uncertain than ever, Tom wrestled with the inheritance and all it might mean. The decision that lay before him suddenly loomed larger than life, a crossroads that could either mend their bond or tear it down for good. Would Jake come around to learn the lessons tucked away in that land, or would pride and desire blind him from understanding the depths of sacrifice? As the screen flickered, so did the promise of stability, and Tom knew they were on the brink of something spiraling out of control. Tom sat in the dim light of the kitchen, the weight of the inheritance heavy on his heart. He felt torn, awareness of his own inadequacies gnawing at him. The land held promise, an avenue for a new beginning, but it also represented a challenge that threatened to unravel all he had. Could he really transform his legacy into something that taught Jake the value of hard work, or would it become just another obstacle in their already tenuous relationship? As the news of layoffs lingered in the air, Tom crafted an internal strategy. He needed to reframe their perspective on money and success. Teaching Jake about responsibility wasn't merely about denying him the latest gaming console. It was about instilling a deeper understanding of hard-earned rewards. He realized that he could use this inheritance not just to ease their financial woes, but to open a dialogue, a learning experience around responsibility, investment, and ultimately growth. The next day, Tom decided to take a bold step. He responded to the inheritance lawyer, setting up a meeting to discuss the specifics and the best way to handle the land. He resolved to clarify not just the facts of inheritance, but also its implications. Meanwhile, he strategized a plan to talk with Jake, hoping to connect their personal struggles with a vision of the future that included both of them. That evening, Tom invited Jake to join him for a walk after dinner, a small attempt to carve out time for a more serious conversation. As they strolled through their quiet neighborhood, he probed gently. "What do you think about starting a small business?" he asked, gauging Jake's reaction. "A business? Like what?" Jake responded, his interest piqued. "I was thinking maybe we could take the land we inherited and create something useful out of it. Maybe a garden or even a small rental property, something that can teach us the value of investment." Tom's voice wavered as he spoke. Would Jake see this as a punishment or an opportunity? Jake shrugged, the teenage nonchalance masking a flicker of intrigue. "Sounds like a lot of work, Dad. Why not just sell it and use the money for something fun?" "Because money and fun are not always the same thing," Tom replied, urgency creeping into his voice. "You might enjoy a new gaming console today, but if we put in the effort on that land, it could generate something far more invaluable in the future. It's about learning to invest in ourselves and our future." A silence enveloped them, thicker than the humid evening air. It was a moment depending equally on their shared history and Jake's potential to grasp the deeper meaning behind Tom's words. Tom realized that the challenge lay in how he framed this venture. He pondered how to make it relatable, engaging for Jake, rather than another chore imposed by a father tethering too tightly. "Look, I know you see money differently, but if we start this together, we'll be partners. We can decide together how to use what we make. You'll have a say in it, and you can learn the hustle required to make something flourish." He hoped to spark a fire, to ignite something in Jake that looked beyond the immediate gratification of consumerism. Jake's body language softened, but uncertainty was still palpable in his eyes. He seemed stuck between the impulse to rebel and a budding curiosity about the work ahead. Tom's heart raced, an impatient drumbeat resonating in his ears. Would their next conversation deepen the rift, or could they finally find ground? In that moment, Tom glimpsed a sliver of hope, a tentative truth emerging through the fog of their past. He fought against the urge to pressure Jake further. Instead, he would give him space to process the idea without dismissing it outright. With a sense of newfound determination, Tom silently committed to both nurturing Jake's desires and guiding him toward a far more grounded understanding of life's realities. But as the day-ending sun slipped behind the horizon, another jolt of reality struck. How could he balance all this, especially knowing that the factory was still dangling on the edge of a layoff? Against a backdrop of uncertainty, Tom understood that confronting his fears about work and financial stability would be as crucial as nurturing Jake's growth. As they reached home, Tom resolved to dive deeper into his plan for the land ahead of their meeting with the lawyer, the first step on this treacherous path that might lead to rebuilding a fractured relationship. But an unsettling thought crept in, whispering a question deep within. What if he couldn't convince Jake after all? What if this newfound venture shattered the fragile hope they both clung to? With the echoes of unspoken truths hanging between them, Tom stepped inside, uncertainty looming just beyond the threshold. The stakes were rising, and he wondered, was he ready to face the deeper truths of their relationship, or would he risk losing not just money, but time, love, and the connection they desperately needed? Tom woke early the next morning, the dawn light spilling uneasily through the curtains. He lay in bed, wrestling with the day ahead. The meeting with the inheritance lawyer mirrored his internal turmoil. He needed clarity, yet deep down he questioned his ability to make the right decisions. The stakes were escalating, and Tom understood it was time to consolidate not only his plans for the land, but also his fatherly authority in a way that truly connected with Jake. As he dressed, Tom's thoughts turned to financial stability and what it meant to cultivate something of lasting value. It wasn't just about the land, it was about the lessons it could impart. Yet the nagging fear of losing his job loomed large. The factory whispers of layoffs hovered above like dark clouds threatening his newly budding aspirations. He thought back to when he was a young father, eager to impart wisdom to Jake. What did he wish to pass on? Two concepts stood out: resilience and adaptability. He could leverage this situation to model both. If it meant transforming the burden of inheritance into a joint venture, then he had to lean into these principles with Jake. With a deep breath, Tom decided on a different approach for the meeting with the lawyer. He wouldn't merely sit and absorb information. He would engage, asking questions that would not only clarify his responsibilities, but also help meander through the implications their inheritance carried for both of them. He knew this wasn't just about land. It had the potential to reshape their lives. Jake had a propensity to latch onto concepts he found engaging. If Tom could frame the whole idea of their venture in a way that appealed to Jake's youthful energy, he might just open a door to their shared future. He vowed to incorporate the discussions of their business plan into their conversations moving forward, ensure Jake felt included, that his voice mattered. That afternoon, as Tom entered the lawyer's office, he felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. The room exuded a sterile professionalism, reflecting the serious nature of the conversations that would unfold. Mr. Hendricks, the lawyer, was a steady presence, his matronly gaze unyielding as he began outlining the options regarding the land. Tom focused on absorbing every detail, jotting down notes, signaling to himself the importance of focusing on actionable steps. "What are your intentions with the property?" Mr. Hendricks asked, glancing over the rim of his glasses. Tom hesitated for a heartbeat. The question echoed more deeply than expected. "I want to build something that teaches my son. I want us to learn together about responsibility, investment, something sustainable." The words flowed with an unexpected strength, surprising even himself.
The lawyer said, nodding slowly. "That's a noble aspiration, but you must also understand the market. It requires an investment of time, energy, and risk. Are you prepared for that?" His mind raced, contemplating the challenges that lay ahead. "Yes, I believe I am, but I need to figure out how to engage my son in the process. It cannot just be a burden. It has to be something he feels a part of," Tom confessed, his voice a blend of resolve and uncertainty. As they wrapped up, Tom felt a sense of clarity begin to form. He wasn't just a father trying to impart lessons. He was embarking on a journey of growth for both himself and Jake. This was about more than land or money. It was about fostering a partnership built on trust, commitment, and education. Returning home, Tom found Jake sprawled on the couch with his eyes glued to the screen. He hesitated before speaking. How could he break the news in a way that excited rather than intimidated? "Hey, I met with the lawyer today," Tom initiated, noting Jake's distracted expression. "Cool," Jake mumbled, barely looking up. Tom took a breath, ready to pivot their conversation into more fertile ground. "We have some options with the land that could really change things for us if we work together." Jake turned, interest flickering across his face. "Like what?" "Like starting a business together," Tom stated, determination infusing his voice. "We could create something meaningful, and guess what? You'd have a say in everything." As he revealed the potential that lay within their inheritance, he felt a rush of anticipation mingled with nervousness. Would Jake be invested? Could this be the bridge they needed to mend their relationship? But uncertainty still coiled like a loose thread beneath their conversation. What if Jake dismissed the idea as just another chore? What if this connection fell apart like so many before? The stakes were rising, and Tom realized that the true challenge awaited him not just in convincing Jake, but in stepping back to allow Jake to lead in ways he had never anticipated. He settled with the rut in his stomach, knowing that this entire venture could either fortify their relationship or fracture it irreparably. With a resolute heart and a silent demand for courage, Tom prepared to face the unknown, the weight of the inheritance now stitched into the fabric of their renewed bond. But as they embarked on this journey, he wondered, would they find strength to navigate the challenges ahead together, or would they falter beneath the pressures of expectations? The following morning, Tom awoke with a sense of purpose that felt both alien and exhilarating. Today marked a shift. He could feel it in the marrow of his bones. The conversation with Jake lingered in his thoughts, a potential partnership that sparked both thrill and apprehension. He had glimpsed a possibility of reconnection, and now he needed to act. As he sipped his coffee, Tom gazed out at the land that sprawled before him, wild, untamed, yet brimming with possibility. This wasn't just soil and grass. It was a canvas upon which he and Jake could paint their future. Each blade of grass carried the weight of their hopes. It could be transformed into something that mattered, something that united them. But there was an undercurrent of fear coiling deep within him. Would Jake truly embrace this vision? Could he shed the hesitation that had long characterized their interactions? Shaking off the doubts, Tom grabbed a notepad and began outlining their business plan, hoping to solidify not just the details, but the feelings that they would need to kindle this venture into a reality. Later that day, he called Jake over, steering clear of the usual distractions. "I want to show you something." He held up the notepad, the ideas scrawled across the pages bursting with potential. "We can start a small farm, grow our own vegetables, maybe even raise some chickens. It doesn't have to be luxurious, just something we can manage together. Jake's brow furrowed, skepticism creeping in. But do we even know how to run a farm, Dad? Isn't that a lot of work? Absolutely, Tom said, his voice firm yet encouraging. But think of all the things we could learn. It won't just be work. It'll be an adventure. And you won't be alone in it. We'll figure it out together. I want you to lead some of this, Jake. The challenge hung in the air, the pressure palpable. Could he articulate what lay beneath those words? This wasn't merely about cultivating crops. It was about cultivating their relationship, him recognizing Jake's potential, and possibly revealing his own vulnerabilities to his son. The risks loomed large, but the rewards could be transformative. What if we mess it up? What if it fails? Jake's eyes flickered between concern and curiosity. It might fail, Tom admitted, a knot forming in his stomach. But that's part of learning. The important thing is that we try and do this as a team, and no matter what, I'll support you. That's what I want you to always remember. A flicker of understanding passed over Jake's face, the initial barrier softening just a bit. The thought of trial and failure began to morph into something more, an opportunity to learn from mistakes together, to build resilience. Yet, as much hope radiated from the exchange, a shadow still veiled Tom's thoughts. What if Jake still didn't feel invested enough? What if his son viewed this merely as another obligation? Tom couldn't shake the anxiety that attached itself to every forward step. He needed to ensure this venture didn't weigh Jake down like a chain. It had to lift them both. They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing logistics, dreams, and potential setbacks. Tom donned the role of mentor and coach, pushing past his discomfort. He surprised himself with how invigorated he felt sharing his ideas. Once the day wound down and evening claimed the sky, he excused Jake to retreat to his room. Alone in the dining area, Tom reflected on the conversations. There was a distinct shift occurring, and he felt different, not just as Jake's father, but as a partner in a shared mission. Yet that thought marinated in a feeling he couldn't shake. The fear of the unknown still lurked. Could this mild sense of hope stave off the impending employment turmoil? Could his job survive the chaos? Tom noted that while ventures like this could be healing, they also had the potential to topple under adversity. Vulnerabilities would need facing, wounds would need healing, not just for the land, but for their relationship. With determined strokes of his pen, Tom captured his thoughts, but he felt the stakes rising again. All of this rested precariously on their ability to build trust. He knew with every heartbeat that the next step would matter significantly. As he prepared for bed, Tom couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a far larger challenge. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, deeper connections, and potentially heartbreaking truths. Would tomorrow mark the day they faced their fears together, or would it unravel the fragile hope he had begun to nurture? The thought echoed in his mind long after he turned off the lights, leaving him caught in a web of uncertainty and anticipation. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the kitchen, warm and inviting, but for Tom, it bubbled with uncertainty. He had spent a restless night wondering about the trajectory of his plan, about the conversation he hoped to have with Jake today. Thoughts swirled. What if Jake's enthusiasm waned? Or worse, what if he misread the situation, misaligned their energies while attempting to forge something solid? He prepared breakfast mechanically, letting the routine of frying eggs and brewing coffee ground his spiraling doubts. Each sizzling sound emitted from the pan felt like a metronome, ticking away at the seconds until the pivotal moment arrived. As he plated their meal, he made a mental note to refine his approach, turning what could easily overwhelm Jake into something digestible, less daunting, more exciting. Sitting across from Jake, Tom fixed his gaze on him, studying the boy who had once been so carefree. So, are you ready to dive deeper into the farm idea? He needed to approach this delicately, keeping the anxiety at bay. Yeah, I guess, Jake replied, his tone a mixture of reluctance and underlying intrigue. What are we doing today? We're going to plan a strategy, Tom said, startling himself with the assertiveness of his voice. I want us to think like real farmers. We need to understand the processes involved, what crops to plant, the tools we'll need, and how to manage the growing seasons. Jake picked at his food, his brow furrowed in thought. But what if I don't like it? What if we end up with a ton of tomatoes and no one wants to buy them?
The skepticism lingered, thick in the air. We won't know unless we try, but let's limit ourselves to what we can handle and consider making part of our efforts community-focused, Tom offered, hoping to compassionate their intentions while also addressing Jake's worries. We can learn, adapt, and build this together, a flicker of hope igniting against the shadows of doubt. The rest of the morning spiraled into brainstorming sessions, grappling with challenges and breaking down tasks into achievable goals. They explored local agricultural resources, scoured online forums for beginner farmers, and even crafted a makeshift timeline for planting and harvesting. Tom reveled in the unexpected revelations of Jake's knowledge, the quiet confidence rising up in his son as he contributed ideas that made him feel valued. Yet mingled with encouragement was fear. What if this zest was temporary? What if Jake resumed his usual insouciance once the novelty wore off? Tom wrestled with the implications of their project reaching past mere planting and growing. It was a chance for revival. Would Jake experience growth in himself, or would he revert to the young man Tom saw tugging against any expectation? As afternoon drew close, they headed out to the land, standing side by side, visions blending into the earthy canvas. For the first time, Tom felt brick upon brick being laid in the foundation of their potential partnership. The weight of expectations shifted from his shoulders to the earth beneath them, allowing space for vulnerability. "Can you imagine our first harvest?" Tom ventured. "The beans you picked turning into great meals, or selling produce to neighbors and seeing their faces light up? And bragging in school about it," Jake added, a smile breaking through his earlier doubt. "Exactly." The elation surged within Tom, but underneath an uneasy feeling simmered. Their success hinged on more than planting. It demanded constant engagement, clear communication, and perhaps confronting hidden resentments. He steeled himself, readying for conversations that might become uncomfortable but necessary. "Jake," Tom shifted his weight, unwilling to allow his fear to inhibit progress. "I want to talk about something else too. It's important. We can't just plan the farm. Let's talk about what this could mean for us, and if necessary, what our expectations are." The tone shifted, the stakes heightened. The weight of the discussion lingered, palpable like the pressure before a storm. He had no certainty of where this conversation would lead, or if they had the tools to navigate it honestly. Would this be the moment where they broke through, or simply another chance for miscommunication? Tom held his breath, fully aware that he was risking more than just a partnership in farming. He was risking his heart.
"What do you mean?" Jake asked, his expression shifting. This was it, Tom's chance to take a leap into the unknown depths of their evolving relationship. Would they manage to traverse the vulnerability successfully, or would the conversation reveal fractures too great to mend? The horizon ahead shifted, crackling with tension as he prepared to confront the truth. Tom took a moment to steady himself. The world around them felt distant. The humming of insects and the rustle of leaves blurred into an indistinguishable backdrop. All that mattered now was Jake's expression, an eager yet anxious intersection of childhood innocence and adolescent skepticism. "Jake," he began, measuring each word, "this farm, it's not just about growing food. It's about us. It's about who we are and what we can become together. I need us to be honest with each other about what we want and expect from this." Jake stared blankly for a moment, his eyes darting between Tom and the ground. The silence churned inside Tom's chest, a vortex of anticipation and dread. "Are you saying you want this to be some kind of therapy session?" Jake shot back, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "Like I have issues or something?" "No, not at all," Tom hurried to clarify. "But communication is crucial if we're going to make this work. If there's something bothering either of us, we need to address it up front. We're building a partnership here, like co-pilots. If one of us isn't on board, the whole thing could just crash." Jake's face tightened, that youthful uncertainty transforming his features. Tom observed the flicker of emotions dancing across his son's face. Pain, fear, confusion, and beneath it all, the glimmer of hope he hadn't realized he was searching for. "What if I mess up?" Jake finally asked, his voice softer, revealing an unexpected vulnerability. "What if I don't have what it takes?" Tom felt a quiet storm of emotions rising. His instinct to offer reassurance battled against his own uncertainties. "What if we did mess up?" he countered gently. "Mistakes will happen. That's part of the learning curve. What matters is how we respond. We can't let fear paralyze us." Something shifted with Jake. He leaned slightly forward, a visual cue that he was engaging with Tom's words. "I guess I just feel like I'm not enough sometimes,
Like you're expecting me to be a real farmer, and I don't even know how to plant a seed. The authenticity of Jake's admission struck Tom like an arrow. Listen to me, he said, firm yet kind. Being a real farmer isn't just about knowing everything. It's about showing up, being willing to learn, to dig deep, even when the ground is hard. Tom was taken aback by his own clarity, feeling a surge of insight. He was not solely recruiting Jake as a farming partner. He was inviting him into a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and courage. Could this venture bring forth something transformative for both of them?
"You're not alone in this," he continued, determined to bolster Jake's confidence. "I'll be right here, and I won't let you fail. We'll take it one step at a time, together." Jake's shoulders relaxed, and Tom could see the hard shell slowly cracking. "Okay, let's do it. Let's try," he replied, a smile starting to form, though it was still tentatively balancing on his lips. "Great," Tom said, feeling the weight shift in their dynamic. A solid foundation was beginning to take root. They turned toward the expanse of land in front of them, the sun's rays igniting the soil's energy, a tangible promise that echoed their fresh resolve. As they discussed what they needed to do first, a new rhythm began to emerge. Tom realized this project was unlocking parts of both of them, his maturity juxtaposed with Jake's renewal. Yet lingering doubts skittered around the edges of this joy. What if, despite their enthusiasm, real-world obstacles loomed larger than their initial resolve? Would Jake continue to engage with the same vigor as challenges piled up? Tom felt a creeping apprehension. The path ahead was uncharted and perilous. He couldn't ignore the thought that as much as farming would nourish them, emotional labor would be necessary to sustain their newly formed bond. "Tomorrow, we'll start planning where to plant our first seeds," he declared, seeking to seal this commitment with action. "Seeds," Jake echoed, digesting the concept of both the literal and metaphorical meanings entangled in their conversation. "Right, but just remember, the most important seeds are the ones we plant inside ourselves," Tom said, leaving the statement lingering in the air. "Yeah," Jake trailed off, the assertion resonating. The night wrapped around them, and Tom understood that they had just taken a monumental step, yet he remained acutely aware that the real work lay ahead, and it would test the integrity of their relationship in ways they couldn't yet foresee. As they retreated towards home, Tom whispered a silent promise to himself. Tomorrow would be a leap into the unknown, with stakes higher than crushing tomatoes or triumphing over weeds. What lay ahead was a journey to reclaim not only the farm, but the bond with his son. What surprises awaited them on that journey, and would they have the courage to face them together? The sun rose bright and unrelenting, casting long shadows across the earth as Tom stood at the edge of the field. Today was more than just a day of planting. It felt like the first chapter in a new book, one full of possibilities and unpredictability. With a shovel in hand and a plan emerging in his mind, Tom felt the morning air brisk against his skin. He could sense the urge to instruct Jake looming as he approached, but he hesitated. The previous evening had revealed cracks in his son's armor, and today wouldn't be about authority, but collaboration. "Ready?" Jake asked, hesitantly.
His excitement was palpable, yet beneath it lay the remnants of doubt. "Let's make a plan first," Tom suggested, choosing to engage rather than dictate. "What do you think we should start with? We have corn, tomatoes, maybe some herbs?" Jake weighed his options, glancing at the soil as if it held the answers. "What about the tomatoes? They're the easiest, right?" he answered, his tone more assertive than it had been the night before. "Good idea. They're forgiving. Just like us, I hope," Tom chuckled, but his mind raced. Could Jake handle the responsibility when things inevitably went wrong? Together, they moved through the motions of plotting out the rows. The physical labor was grounding, each dig of the shovel mixing sweat with hope. Yet Tom's resolve to maintain a supportive atmosphere was constantly threatened by his own fears. As they worked, Tom felt the pressure of Jake's unspoken expectations. He was aware of his son's longing to prove himself, but the nagging fear that torment loomed close. Would he be able to shake off the weight of his past failures as a father? Moments passed, and as they began to sow the seeds, Tom noticed Jake's gaze shifting toward the horizon. "What if we're not ready for this?" he suddenly voiced, the vulnerability returning. "What if I ruin everything?" "Remember, it's okay to fail, Jake," Tom replied, attempting to capitalize on the candidness from the day before. "Every farmer has stories of failure. It's how you learn to grow. Like this," he gestured to the seeds, now nestled in the ground. "They won't know what to do unless we let them come forth." Jake nodded slowly, taking in his father's words. "You really believe that?" There was a mix of skepticism and a budding trust in his tone. "I do, but it's a process," a lightness emerging in his heart. "We've got to give ourselves the space to figure things out, together."
As the day wore on, Tom felt the energy shift. The initial doubts began to wane, as if they were tending to the soil. Jake was finding his rhythm, moving from task to task with increasing confidence, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had once clouded his face. However, beneath that confidence lay something else, an undercurrent of tension surrounding their unaddressed feelings. Tom worried that they were filling the gaps with busy work, avoiding the deeper conversations they needed. Would their shared goal of farming be enough to bridge the emotional distances they'd built over the years? By mid-afternoon, the sun hung high, its intensity forcing them to take a break. Sipping water, they surveyed their small plot of freshly tilled land, now adorned with tomato seeds, a humble beginning teeming with potential. Yet as Tom looked at Jake, he sensed the shadows creeping back into his son's eyes. "Is it weird if I want more than just this?" he suddenly voiced, the vulnerability surfacing once more. Tom frowned, realizing the depth of his son's question. "Like what?"
More responsibility on the farm? Nah, like life, school, friends. The whole thing feels bigger than just farming, Dad," Jake replied, squirming under the weight of his own aspirations. That statement hung in the air, charged with tension. Tom's heart sank as he processed the implications. Were they both caught in a web of self-doubt, too afraid to admit that their paths had already diverged? Tom chose his words carefully. Farming can teach you so much about life, but it can't be everything. It's just one piece of a larger puzzle. It's about integrating everything. Your dreams, struggles, relationships. What do you see for yourself, beyond the farm? Jake stared at the ground, his silence saying more than words could convey. As father and son navigated their new world, teetering at the edge of familiarity and uncertainty, Tom realized the stakes were higher than he had anticipated. The seedlings they had planted today were merely symbols. Would they have the courage to cultivate something more meaningful in their lives? The impending challenges loomed larger than before, but as he glanced at Jake, filled with flickers of determination, Tom understood. Transformation hardly ever came without conflict. Their journey was just beginning, yet hidden within those seeds lay the potential for much more than their initial intentions. Tom took a deep breath, preparing to push their conversation further. But first, he needed to know, would Jake acknowledge his fears, or would they sink in the shadows? And as the evening settled over them, filled with the promise of growth, Tom couldn't shake the core question. What would it truly take to nurture not just their land, but the bond they shared? Tom sensed an unfuzzling heaviness in the air as he watched Jake's feet shuffle in the dirt. The vulnerability that danced in his son's eyes was a reflection of a tempest surging just below the surface, a battle of aspirations that mirrored his own. He felt that the day's earlier victories were on the verge of eroding, swept away by questions not yet spoken. "Jake," Tom ventured, breaking the tense silence, "it's okay to want more. Wanting to explore your options, it doesn't mean abandoning the farm. It just means building on what you know." The sun cast a golden hue over the field, illuminating the potential for growth in every planted seed. Yet the brightness felt overshadowed by the unspoken words still hanging between them. Would Jake embrace the idea of integrating farming with his broader aspirations, or would he reject it, seeing it as a tether to a life he no longer wanted? What if my dreams lead me away from here?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. The question struck Tom like a cold wind. He had lived through that very fear and had clung to the belief that staying rooted was the only way to find security. But could he impose that thinking upon Jake? I can't tell you what path to take, buddy." "All I can do is share what I know," Tom replied, choosing honesty over uncertainty. "What about your friends? What do they say about their dreams?" "They think it's weird I'm out here instead of hanging out or working on school stuff." Jake's defensive posture suggested he was caught between loyalty to the farm and the pull of his peers' expectations. "Maybe I should just put in the hours and keep my head down." Tom felt the weight of his son's struggle, and in that moment he wanted to reach out and tell him that hard work didn't have to mean sacrificing happiness. But how? You need to define what success means to you, not let anyone else dictate it. Jake looked away, brow furrowing as if piecing together a puzzle he had been avoiding. "I don't want to fail, Dad. I don't know how to do both. Work here and have a life outside of this field." The admission sparked something in Tom. It was a reminder of his own buried fears. He remembered the endless nights spent working, while dreams of exploration faded into the background. Learning to juggle those things, work and personal dreams, ain't easy for anyone, Jake. But it can be done. Look at the crops. They provide, but require care to flourish. For a moment, the field felt like a battleground of unfulfilled potential,
and Tom desperately wanted to guide his son through it without imposing his own regrets. How about this? We set a time each week for you to explore something outside of here. Whether that's a class, a club, or even hanging out with friends, it can coexist with your work here. Jake looked at him, skepticism mixed with something else, hope. But what if I don't want to come back after that? Then we'll talk about it. No strings attached. Tom offered, recognizing the tension lifted slightly from Jake's shoulders. A shift occurred as Jake swiped his brow. A hint of a smile appeared. That sounds fair, I guess. As dusk approached, casting long shadows over the fields, Tom realized they were traversing into a dynamic territory together. The seeds they had planted earlier symbolized not only new crops, but the very growth of their relationship, challenging yet essential. Hey, Dad. Jake's voice broke the quiet, hesitant yet determined. Do you think I could take a weekend off soon? Something to just clear my head? The request hung in the air, neither simple nor trivial. Tom considered the implications. His instinct was to say no, to cling to the structure they had built. But what was structure without purpose? Yeah, we can look at that. It's about balance, remember? In that moment, Tom saw something shift within Jake, a nascent recognition that a part of his father's lessons was adaptation, a realization that could redefine their journey. As they slowly gathered their tools, Tom's heart resonated with a deeper understanding. This was an unsteady step towards nurturing something more profound between them.
The evening sky, painted in hues of orange and pink, whispered promises of new beginnings. But as Tom gathered the last of the shovels, he couldn't shake the worry that lingered like a shadow. The path ahead would not be easy. Jake may have found a chorus of confidence today, yet would he be able to maintain it against the tides of expectation? Tom pondered how they could shield that budding transformation as their conversation progressed. Jake, he said softly as they drew close to the truck, what if I told you that facing these uncertainties is just part of the journey? Jake turned, meeting his father's gaze with newfound determination, ready to confront what lay ahead. But could Tom remain open to his son's evolving aspirations without clinging to his own fears of inadequacy? A profound crossroads emerged, and Tom understood they stood at the precipice of something monumental. As they drove home in silence, Tom felt an unshakable urge to explore it further, the question lingering in his heart. How would they navigate these dual aspirations together, and what would emerge from the shadows as they ventured further into this unknown territory? The following week arrived as a blur, filled with whispered aspirations and the clamor of daily chores competing for attention. Yet Tom couldn't shake the lingering hope that something significant was unfolding between him and Jake. The unspoken words from his previous conversation played repeatedly in his mind, like an unfinished melody, driving him to be a better father, not just in this moment, but in every possible moment moving forward. Determined to encourage Jake's exploration, he found himself contemplating ways to support his son's interests. It took only a few discussions at the local diner to learn about a community workshop teaching coding to teenagers. The thought of Jake learning to code sent a thrill through Tom. Technology was another landscape, much like his farm, buzzing with potential. They could cultivate together, harnessing resources that allowed for growth beyond the familiar soil. Tom approached Jake with the idea over dinner, his voice steady yet charged with excitement. You know, there's a coding workshop next weekend. Interested? Jake looked up, surprise flickering across his face as he chewed. Coding? Seriously? Yeah, why not? It could help you see things differently, a way to explore outside of farming. Plus, it might just give you ideas about what you want to do next. Jake leaned back in his chair, clearly weighing the offer as skepticism creased his brow. I don't know, Dad. What if I don't get it? Or what if it doesn't lead anywhere? Challenging his instinct to reassure, Tom took a breath, understanding that confidence grew from confrontation and not from avoiding discomfort. What if you do get it? What if it opens doors for you that you didn't even know existed? Remember, success is about how many paths you try.
Jake fell silent, his fingers playing with his fork. It struck Tom that this hesitation wasn't just about the coding. It was a microcosm of a greater fear of the unknown. It's okay to feel uncertain. Learning something new is always daunting, but knowing you took that leap matters most.
Tom watched as Jake's determination flickered like a candle struggling against a breeze. He remembered that feeling all too well, the fear of newness weighed down by the comfort of the familiar. "Okay, I'll give it a shot," Jake finally said, nodding slowly. The next few days found Tom just as anxious as Jake. He discerned a trembling excitement mingling with dread, afraid that his son could discover depths of self-belief that might eclipse his connection to the life they had built. The juxtaposition of fatherhood brought out his inner turmoil. He was proud yet fearful, ambitious yet protective. When the day of the workshop arrived, the small community center buzzed with nervous energy as kids filed into desks, their faces a collage of hope and anxiety. Tom watched as Jake, despite his earlier trepidations, displayed an eagerness that took root deeper than Tom anticipated. The workshop comprised a blend of instruction and hands-on practice, the instructor guiding them through lines of code as easily as one might navigate a field of corn. As the hours passed, Tom marveled at Jake's tenacity. His son was engaged, fully immersed in a world of puzzles and solutions. It was exhilarating. Drop by drop, the seeds of creativity germinated within Jake. Each keystroke bore the promise of connection and a newfound identity. Tom couldn't help but feel a sense of pride wrapping around him, both as a father and as someone rooted in the possibility of change. However, as he observed, a troubling thought crept into his consciousness. What if this burgeoning interest led Jake away from the farm for good? Tom fended off the fear, acknowledging it as inevitable growth. But would he be able to let go? Later that evening, as they settled at home, the phone rang. Tom answered, the voice on the other end bringing news that shifted everything. His old friend and mentor from the agricultural community had suffered a heart attack. The gravity of the situation crushed him. This event held more than emotional weight. It hinted at the precariousness of life choices and future responsibilities. As he processed this news, Tom recognized another truth churning within him. Balancing personal dreams with familial obligations wouldn't be just about Jake anymore. He would have to confront his fears, and that included stepping out into the unknown, just as his son was learning to do. "What have you learned today?" Tom asked Jake at dinner, forcing the subtle tremor of dread down as he attempted to anchor himself in the present. Jake looked up, a spark igniting in his eyes. "It's complicated, but I think coding is kind of like farming.
You plant the seeds, you water them, and you see what grows." As that realization blossomed in their exchange, an uneasy yet exhilarating tapestry of uncertainty wove itself between the two. Little did they know, the true test of their resolve and the meaning of legacy was beginning to unfurl beneath the surface. Tom felt a tension knotting his stomach. The road ahead was murkier than ever. How would they face the complexities of their aspirations amidst this sudden life crisis? The only certainty was that the journey had only just begun. Tom awoke the next morning with an unexpected clarity. The news about his friend lingered at the forefront of his mind, yet it catalyzed a commitment deeper than he'd ever felt before. Today, he would not only face his fears, but would also create opportunities for Jake to do the same. It was time to steer their journey, not just down the path of farming, but towards understanding their identities as individuals. As he brewed coffee, he gazed at the land stretching outside their window. Each blade of grass danced lightly in the morning breeze, and the soil, still damp from the rain, beckoned with potential. This wasn't just about cultivating crops. It was about nurturing a space where curiosity, ambition, and vulnerability could thrive. "Jake," he called out, steeling himself for what he hoped would be a pivotal conversation. "Are you free for a minute after breakfast? There's something important I want to discuss." "Sure, Dad," Jake replied, a hint of uncertainty lining his voice. Tom knew it was vital to ensure Jake felt safe and valued today, amidst the blur of emotions. Once seated, Tom felt the heaviness of emotional stakes. "I want to talk about the future, not just the farm, but everything you're exploring. You're at a point where both of us need to be open about our dreams." Jake fiddled with his spoon, a mix of curiosity and apprehension evident on his face. "What do you mean?" "I want to find a way to balance things. You've got this new interest in coding, and I'm trying to keep the farm running, but I also want your input in what comes next. It isn't just my farm, it's our farm. Your voice matters." A slow realization seemed to wash over Jake. His expression shifted from skepticism to contemplation. "You really think I can have a say?" "Absolutely," Tom continued, fighting the urge to assert authority. "I want us to work together, to dream together. If you're excited about coding, let's incorporate that into our plans for the land and our lives." Jake leaned forward, intrigue lighting up his eyes. "How do we do that?"
I've been thinking we could use some coding to help create an online community hub for our farm. We could share updates and even sell produce online. What if you found ways to mix coding and farming? For the first time, Tom saw a glimmer of excitement bloom in Jake's demeanor. That could be cool. I've learned how to build simple websites. I could show you.
The realization prompted a surge of energy within Tom. Their roles were shifting. This was no longer merely about him mentoring Jake, but rather a mutual exchange of insights and aspirations. That's the spirit. I'll help you with the farm logistics, and you teach me the coding. Together, we can turn this land into something that highlights both our skills. In the midst of their burgeoning partnership, Tom felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They were crafting a landscape of potential, not just in the soil, but within their father-son dynamic. What if we create a system where the community can place orders for fresh veggies? Jake suggested, his confidence growing, animated by the partnerships they could forge. Exactly. Imagine the connections we could build. Plus, it offers control over how we run things. We can both chase our passions creatively while managing the farm. The notion hung between them, an invisible thread weaving their ambitions together in a richly transformative manner. As the conversation continued, Tom absorbed Jake's enthusiasm, celebrating the shift occurring within both of them. He sensed that this conversation would mark a turning point, a redefining moment of trust, partnership, and connection. However, as they mapped out their interaction with the community, a flicker of doubt edged into Tom's consciousness. How would they manage the workload? What if Jake decided coding eclipsed his desire for farming? For the first time, those uncertainties felt manageable rather than daunting. Instead of controlling the outcome, he could support Jake's journey, embracing the unpredictability that accompanied it. By the end of breakfast, Tom felt a palpable excitement blossom, not merely nourished by plans for the farm, but by the very rekindling of their relationship. They were no longer a son looking up to a father, but rather co-creators embarking on a significant journey together. The day unfolded with laughter and hard work as they delved deeply into the tasks ahead, crafting marketing notes for their future business, recording farm updates, and sowing new seeds in both the soil and their ambitions. In the following weeks, Jake's ideas flourished alongside the plants sprouting from their freshly turned earth. Each aspect of their venture reinforced their shared commitment. The soil was as much a part of their growth as the coding lessons taught in the evenings. Moments of uncertainty surfaced naturally, yet each time they did, Tom reminded Jake that every obstacle represented nothing more than an opportunity for growth. But just as things appeared to stabilize, the call that would require true engagement and vigilance arrived, a notice from the factory about upcoming layoffs. The emotional toll reverberated through Tom, intensifying his determination to create a sustainable life for his family.
"This isn't just about the farm anymore. It's about our entire future," he declared, supporting Jake's ambitions amidst the looming uncertainties. As they faced potential change, the revelation rang clear. They were no longer navigating these obstacles in isolation. Together they stood resolute, fully aware that whatever lay ahead, they had the courage and tools to meet it. On a sunny afternoon, surrounded by their growing crops and the vibrant buzz of the codes they'd woven, Tom recognized in both himself and Jake a perspective shift towards resilience, partnership, and hope. They were transforming fears into experiences, and through that, they were growing into who they were meant to be. Thus, the seeds planted, both in the earth and in their hearts, began to flourish into something infinitely more valuable than either had ever anticipated. Each day was a deeper exploration and acknowledgement of their capacities, lovingly nurtured into a truly rewarding bond. With the final harvest of tomatoes fast approaching, Tom beamed with pride, aware that this journey represented more than just crops and coding. It symbolized achievement and transformation, real growth in the truest sense, rooted firmly in the rich soil of shared aspirations. In this new chapter of their lives, they discovered the essence of partnership, a foundation built not just on work, but on honest engagement, respect, and shared dreams, fulfilling the promise of both father and son, evolving into better versions of themselves. Now it is your moment to engage with powerful stories that showcase transformative journeys. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support our quest for deep narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, and let's spark discussions that matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. It's time to uplift those who matter to you. You need to subscribe now. Show your support and let these narratives resonate within your circles.